Chapter 1. Heading North. Jorgen sat by the window on the train, lost in thought as he watched the bleak and desolate landscape outside. The snow-covered ground extended as far as the eye could see, the frozen terrain devoid of any vegetation. The only signs of life were the occasional black crow perched on a barren tree and the train tracks that wound their way through the bleakness. As he peered out the window, Jorgen couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. He knew that something was coming, that the world was on the brink of change. The winter had been long and harsh, and the landscape outside seemed to mirror the dark and uncertain future that lay ahead. Jorgen turned his attention to the other passengers on the train. They were a motley crew, bundled up in thick coats and scarves, their faces haggard and tired. They looked as though they had weathered many winters and had seen more than their fair share of hard times. Despite the grim surroundings, Jorgen found himself filled with a sense of curiosity and wonder. He had never traveled this far north before, and he was fascinated by the rugged and unforgiving terrain that stretched out before him. He wondered what kind of people lived in such a place, and what secrets the land held. As the train chugged along, Jorgen lost himself in his thoughts. He thought about his mother, who was sick and unable to care for him. He thought about his grandparents, who were waiting for him in Tromsø. The train rattled on, the wheels screeching on the tracks. Jorgen closed his eyes and listened to the sound, letting it lull him into a sense of calm. He knew that something was coming, that the world was about to change, but he didn't know what form that change would take. Jorgen stepped off the train in Tromsø and was greeted by the crisp air of the northern city. The sky was a deep shade of blue, and the sun shone down on the snow-covered streets. He took a deep breath and felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. As he made his way through the city streets, Jorgen couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the town. Tromsø was a small but lively city, surrounded by snow-capped mountains and fjords. The buildings were colorful and charming, their bright colors standing out against the white landscape. As he walked, Jorgen noticed the locals going about their daily business. Some were bundled up in thick coats and hats, while others braved the cold in lighter jackets. He saw families walking together, couples holding hands, and children playing in the snow. Despite the cold weather, the city was alive with activity. The sound of laughter and chatter filled the air, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafted out of the many cafes that lined the streets. As Jorgen walked, he felt a sense of belonging in the city. The people seemed friendly and welcoming, and he felt as though he could make a life for himself in such a place. He wondered what it would be like to grow up in a town like Tromsø, surrounded by nature and a strong sense of community. As he made his way down the winding streets, Jorgen noticed an elderly woman sitting on a bench, staring out at the sea. She had a warm smile on her face and was wrapped up in a thick coat and scarf. Jorgen approached her and struck up a conversation.
"Hello, I'm Jorgen. What a beautiful view,"
he said. The woman turned to him and smiled.
"Hello, Jorgen. My name is Ingrid. It is a beautiful view indeed. Have you come to visit Tromsø?"
Jorgen nodded.
"Yes, I'm visiting my grandparents. It's my first time in Tromsø."
Ingrid smiled.
"Well, you've come at an interesting time. The winter's been long and harsh, but it seems that spring is finally on its way."
Jorgen looked out at the snow-covered landscape and wondered how anyone could survive in such a place.
"It seems like a difficult place to live."
Ingrid laughed.
"It can be, but we've learned to adapt. The winters may be harsh, but the summers are long and full of light. We have a saying in Tromsø, if you can survive the winter, you can survive anything."
Jorgen listened intently as Ingrid spoke about the town's history and culture. He felt a sense of connection to the place and the people, and he wondered what his life would be like if he lived in Tromsø. As he continued his walk through the city, Jorgen saw more of the local life. He passed by a group of musicians playing traditional Sami music. He saw an old man walking his dog and a group of children building a snowman in the town square. As he neared his grandparents' house, Jorgen felt a sense of excitement and nervousness. He wondered what they would think of him and whether he would be able to adapt to life in Tromsø. But as he looked out at the beauty of the city around him, he felt a sense of calm and belonging. Jorgen finally arrived at his grandparents' house, a cozy wooden cabin situated on the outskirts of Tromsø. The cabin was painted in warm earth tones, and smoke was billowing out of the chimney. Jorgen's heart was beating fast as he walked up the steps to the front door. As he knocked on the door, he heard footsteps coming from inside. The door opened, and he was greeted by his grandmother, a kind-looking woman with a warm smile. Her name was Solveig, and she smelled of fresh bread and the sweet aroma of pine. She led Jorgen into the cabin, and he was struck by the warmth and coziness of the interior. The walls were lined with shelves filled with books, and a fire was crackling in the hearth.
Your grandfather is still at work, but he'll be home soon.
Solveig said, leading Jorgen to a comfortable armchair by the fire.
I made some fresh bread and hot cocoa for you.
Jorgen felt a sense of comfort and familiarity as he sat in the armchair and sipped the hot cocoa. He felt grateful to be surrounded by the warmth of his grandparents' love, and he knew that he would be safe and taken care of here. As he ate the fresh bread, Solveig picked up the phone and dialed Jorgen's father's number. Jorgen listened as they spoke briefly about his arrival and his mother's condition. He felt a sense of sadness as he heard the worry in his father's voice, but he was comforted by the love and support of his grandparents. As the evening wore on, Jorgen felt his eyes growing heavy with sleep. His grandmother led him to a cozy bedroom with a soft bed, and he fell into a deep slumber, comforted by the sound of the crackling fire. The next morning, Jorgen awoke to the sound of birds singing outside his window. He dressed quickly and headed to the kitchen, where his grandmother was already preparing breakfast. As they sat at the table eating freshly baked muffins, Jorgen's grandfather arrived home from work. His name was Anders, and he was a tall, stoic man with a kind face. He greeted Jorgen warmly and sat down at the table to eat breakfast with them. As they ate, Anders looked at Jorgen and said,
"We were thinking, Jorgen, that you could stay with us for a few more weeks. We could go fishing in the fjords and hiking in the mountains."
Jorgen's face lit up.
That sounds amazing.
"I'm glad you think so. We want to show you all the beauty of Norway."
And you'll get to taste all of my homemade cooking.
I'm looking forward to it.
Anders and Solveig both looked at Jorgen with warm smiles, and he felt a sense of belonging and safety in their presence.